Ever get that feeling, like the universe is just messing with us? Like it's all one big cosmic joke and we're just along for the ride.
I know exactly what you mean.
Well, today's deep dive is going to throw us headfirst into that feeling.
Oh, what is it this time?
We're tackling The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Ah, a classic. But we're not just talking about the book, are we? This is like a whole interconnected thing, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
We're talking radio, TV, film, even stage adaptations, the whole shebang.
Mm.
And you provided some seriously cool excerpts from the Wikipedia article.
It's a great place to start, for sure. Gives us the lay of the land,
Exactly, because this isn't just about one story. It's about how that story, how it evolved, adapted, and how it just keeps resonating with people even after all these years.
It's a real testament to, I'd say, to the power of imagination.
Totally. And speaking of imagination, we got to start where it all began. 1970s British radio.
BBC Radio 4, to be precise. Which, let's be honest, isn't exactly known for, like, its wild sci-fi craziness.
More like, your cup of tea and a good book kind of vibe.
Exactly.
So not the first place you'd expect a global sci-fi phenomenon to, blast off from.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? And yet, here we are, 1978, a quirky little comedy, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, hits the airwaves.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
But it wasn't an instant smash, was it? I mean, the Wikipedia article mentioned it got a bit of a lukewarm reception at first.
It took a little bit, yeah. I mean, remember, comedy back then, especially on radio, totally different landscape.
Right.
But the thing is, those who got it, they really, really got it.
And word of mouth, well, that's a powerful thing.
It really is.
Because pretty soon everyone was demanding rebroadcasts, and that little show, well, it blossomed into the pop culture icon we know and love today.
And I think a lot of it was the originality. It was so different. Hitchhiker's Guide, at its core, it's a satire of, pretty much everything. Technology, bureaucracy, even the meaning of life. Nothing was off limits. And Adams, he found humor in the most unexpected places. Okay, so speaking of unexpected places, we have to talk about the actual Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the guide itself.
Because it's more than just a title.
Oh, absolutely. It's practically a character.
It is. It's like having the most sarcastic, witty tour guide in your ear the whole time.
And it's not afraid to poke fun at itself.
Yeah.
There's an entry for, let me see, and it simply reads, an ingenious assembly of portable plumbing.
Classics.
I mean, come on, that's brilliant.
It really sums it up perfectly, doesn't it? That dryness, the absurdity, and yet somehow it's insightful.
Exactly. And I love how Adams weaves those little excerpts from the guide throughout the whole story.
Adds a whole other dimension, doesn't it?
It does. It's like having this all-knowing, slightly grumpy narrator commenting on all the ridiculousness.
Exactly. And it lets Adams, explore these really philosophical big ideas without ever getting too heavy or preachy.
Right. It's like, oh, the universe is ending. No worries, here's a hilarious definition of a hyperspace bypass to lighten the mood.
Exactly. That's what makes Hitchhiker's Guide so unique, I think. It's that blend of the profound and the utterly ridiculous.
It's tough balance to strike. And speaking of being thrown into ridiculous situations, we have to talk about Arthur Dent. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Oh, tell me about it.
This poor guy, right? His house gets demolished to make way for a bypass.
Of all things, what?
Hyperspace bypass.
Yeah.
Which is just, come on.
It's so absurd. But that's kind of Arthur's whole deal, isn't it? Just when you think it can't get weirder.
Exactly. He's this totally ordinary guy thrust into the most extraordinary, and let's face it, often deeply confusing situations.
And he handles it all with such,
I know. He's just trying to figure it out like the rest of us.
Right. I mean, haven't we all felt a bit lost and out of our depth at some point? Like, maybe the universe really is playing a big cosmic joke on us, and we just haven't gotten the punchline yet.
Maybe that's the whole point.
It's that feeling, right? Just adrift in a universe that, let's be honest, rarely makes any sense.
And poor Arthur.
Bless his heart. He just kind of stumbles through it all.
Usually with a nice cup of tea, if I remember correctly. Which, I kind of respect.
Oh, absolutely. The ultimate coping mechanism. But we can't forget, of course, about the rest of the gang. His companions on this, shall we say, unconventional journey?
Oh, right. Because he's not alone in this crazy universe.
Not at all. There's Ford Prefect, our alien friend who drops the bombshell that, surprise, Earth was a giant computer all along.
Just another Tuesday in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the universe, right?
Pretty much. And then you've got Zaphod Beeblebrox, the two-headed, completely bonkers galactic president.
Don't forget Marvin.
Oh, right, how could we? Marvin the paranoid android, perpetually gloomy, but somehow always good for a laugh.
It's quite the crew when you think about it.
It really is. Talk about a motley bunch.
No wonder their adventures are so unpredictable. You never know what's coming next.
That's part of the fun, though, isn't it? The sheer unpredictability.
Oh, absolutely. And the way Adams plays with it all, jumping from one absurdity to the next, but always somehow weaving in these really profound observations about, well, everything. Life, the universe, the whole shebang.
It's masterful, really. He makes you laugh, and then he makes you think.
Okay, but speaking of things that make you think, we have to talk about the different versions of Hitchhikers. Because you've got the radio series, the books, that TV show, the movie. It's a lot to unpack.
It's a whole multimedia extravaganza, which is fascinating in itself. Because Adams didn't see these adaptations as just, retellings.
Right.
Each new medium was a chance to play with the story again, to refine it, expand it, even contradict himself sometimes.
It makes me think of that quote. I think it was Adams himself who said it. I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they fly by.
Sounds about right.
The man was a master of chaos, but like a brilliant kind of chaos.
Absolutely. He was always experimenting, always pushing those boundaries.
Which I think is what makes the whole franchise so much fun to explore. It's not about getting bogged down in what's canon or, what's the right version.
It's about embracing the absurdity.
Just like the guide itself.
Precisely. Each adaptation is a new take on the hitchhiker's spirit. It's like looking through a different lens at the same wonderfully weird universe.
I like that. So where should we start with these adaptations? Want to go back to the source?
Back to the radio waves, it is.
Yeah.
That's where the magic began. And for a lot of fans, it's still a definitive version.
It was groundbreaking stuff. The Wikipedia article mentioned it was the BBC's first comedy series produced in stereo.
Can you imagine?
And not just stereo, they went all out with the sound effects. It was like a sonic experience, right?
Absolutely. Adams wanted to create a world you could step into, like a rock concert for your ears.
He wanted you to feel like you were right there with Arthur and Ford hitching across the galaxy.
Exactly.
And it worked. I mean, who could forget that theme tune? Journey of the Sorcerer. Still gives me chills.
Such an iconic piece of music.
Those guitars, the rhythm, even the banjo.
The banjo.
It's so unexpected.
But it works, doesn't it? It adds this, folksy, traveling kind of vibe.
Which I guess makes sense, right? Even in space, they're still basically on a road trip.
Exactly. See, it's those little touches, They make all the difference.
So we got this incredible radio series. And it ran for, 6 seasons?
6 in total.
Wow.
Spanning almost 3 decades. Can you believe it?
Talk about dedicated fans, waiting decades for new adventures with Arthur and the gang.
And the thing is, they weren't just rehashing the same old stuff, the later series. They gave Adams a chance to really dive deep into the Hitchhiker's universe.
Oh, so it was more like a continuation.
Exactly. He could explore themes from the later books, create new material to tie it all together. It was a real evolution. And even after Adams passed away in 2001, the story continued.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Ewan Colfer, with the blessing of Adams' estate, he wrote the 6th radio series. And another thing. Picked up right where the 5th book left off.
That's incredible. It really speaks to the power of what Adams created, that even after he was gone, the story could continue.
It's a legacy, for sure. But of course, we can't talk about Hitchhikers without mentioning,
The books.
The books. For many, that's the entry point to this whole crazy world.
They're often described as, get this, a trilogy in 5 parts.
Which sounds about right, coming from Douglas Adams.
Right. But that's what's so great about the books. They came after the radio series, but Adams didn't just, transcribe the scripts.
Oh, no, not at all. He saw it as a chance to play again, to refine things, add new layers, surprise people.
So even if you'd heard the radio series, the books were a whole new experience.
Absolutely. For example, Zaphod Beeblebrox, our 2-headed president, he's a major player in the radio series right from the start. In the books, he doesn't even show up until the 2nd book.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference. Any other big changes like that?
Well, the ending. The radio series, especially those later seasons, they end on a slightly more, how should I put it, hopeful note. Whereas the final book, mostly harmless, it's a bit bleaker.
Fascinating. It's like he couldn't resist messing with our expectations, even when it came to something as big as the ending.
It's true. And that's what makes discussing Hitchhikers so interesting. There are always new things to discover, different ways to see the same story.
Like peeling back layers of an onion. But this onion makes you laugh and occasionally want to throw your towel into a black hole.
Exactly. But speaking of adaptations, we should probably talk about the 1981 TV series.
Oh, right. Bringing those iconic characters and locations to the screen for the first time.
It was a bold move. I mean, how do you translate that unique brand of humor, the absurdity, into something visual? Especially with the technology back then.
It must have been a challenge.
A big one, but from what I've heard, they managed to capture some of the magic.
They did.
Oh, yeah. It sticks pretty closely to the first two books, although, of course, there are some changes. Some things had to be, shall we say, reimagined for television.
Sounds like a product of its time, but in a good way, hopefully.
Oh, definitely. It has a certain charm. A lot of fans have a real soft spot for it. Although it's a shame they never made that second season.
Ah, another victim of creative differences. A tale as old as time.
Isn't it? But let's not dwell on what could have been. We've got a whole other adaptation to discuss. The 2005 film.
Oh, right. Now, that one seems to be a bit of a hot topic among the fans. It's like you either love it or you hate it. There's not a lot of middle ground.
I get that. I think with the film, you can really see the challenges of adapting Hitchhikers. Because how do you capture that dry, absurdist humor, that tone,
Right.
and then translate it to the big screen to a wider audience?
That's the thing, right? It's more than just visuals. It's the pacing, the tone. It's like trying to catch lightning in a bottle.
Exactly. So for those diehard fans of the books and the radio series, I can imagine some of the changes were a bit, well,
Jarring.
to say the least. One of the biggest ones, I think, is the focus on the whole, romantic triangle thing between Arthur, Zaphod, and Trillian.
Ah, yes. Hollywood loves a good love triangle.
Right. It's there in the books, sure, but it gets amplified in the film.
Any other big changes that come to mind?
Well, they took some, shall we say, creative liberties with some of the locations, like Vogsphere, the Vogon homeworld. It's barely mentioned in the books, but in the film, it's a pretty significant setting.
So they fleshed out some of the things that Adams only hinted at.
Exactly. Made it more visual, more cinematic, I suppose.
Right. And of course, the ending. That's another big one. It veers pretty far from the books.
It does. And of course, it leaves things open for a sequel, which, well,
Which we never got.
we never got. Sometimes it's for the best, though, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Better one film that takes risks than a whole series that loses its way trying to please everybody. But, speaking of taking risks and trying new things, we can't forget about the stage adaptations.
Oh, right. Hitchhikers on stage.
Because it's not just a radio show, a book series, a TV show, and a film. It's a whole theatrical experience, too.
The Hitchhiker's Guide universe really does lend itself to the stage. It's quirky, it's visual, it's got all those great characters.
Like, it was made for crazy costumes and even crazier set designs.
Exactly. And there have been so many productions over the years, professional, amateur. Everybody wants a piece of that Hitchhiker's magic.
And why not, right? I
Mhm.
mean, who wouldn't want to see Marvin the Paranoid Android brought to life on stage?
It's true. And it works. It really does. From the very first professional production back in '79, can you believe that?
Wow, 79. That's what, just a year after the radio series first aired?
Exactly. And they used 2 usherettes as the narrators for the guide.
That's brilliant.
Isn't it? And then, of course, you've got more recent productions, some with the original cast members even. It just goes to show, I think, that Hitchhiker's Guide, it can work in any medium.
Because it's not about the format. It's about the story. Right? And the heart of the story, that humor, that wit, that love of the absurd, it shines through no matter what. So I think it's safe to say we've thoroughly explored this crazy, wonderful universe. But before we go, we have to talk about its legacy.
Because it's more than just a story now, isn't it? It's this whole cultural touchstone. It's a way of looking at the world, a shared language for anyone who's ever felt like maybe, just maybe, the universe is making it up as it goes along.
Which is all of us, right?
Pretty much. And I think that's what Adams tapped into so brilliantly, that feeling that none of this is as serious as we make it out to be.
It's a good reminder.
It really is, especially these days, to be able to laugh at ourselves, at the universe, at the very idea that there's a guidebook for hitchhiking through the galaxy.
It's kind of liberating when you think about it.
It is. So if the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if it could offer us just one piece of advice for navigating life, the universe, and everything, what do you think it would be?
Oh, that's a tough one. Knowing the guide, it would probably be something both hilarious and strangely wise at the same time.
Probably. Something like, always know where your towel is, never underestimate the power of a good cup of tea, and in the face of overwhelming odds, remember, don't panic.
Words to live by, really. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
A journey well traveled.
It really was. But hey, the adventure doesn't have to end here. To all our listeners, whether you're a seasoned space traveler or just hitching your first ride, go pick up a copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, give the radio series a listen, or even give that film another chance. Because you never know. This time, you might just find the answer to the ultimate question.
Or at least you'll have a good laugh along the way.
So long, and thanks for all the fish.